guys, it's Angelo, and after you guys had voted over on YouTube concerning how to structure this video, today we'll be taking a look at all bosses in Castle Nathria from a Shadow Priest point of view in detail. I'll be going over every boss, showing you my gameplay from raid testing, while giving you my insights on that boss as well. With the next raid test cycle, I'll be doing the same for the Discipline Priest, but today we'll be focusing on the Shadow Priest and looking at various things you can take away from seeing each boss, so where to multi-dot, where to possibly position yourself, and so on. Keep in mind please that this is still a beta, so all bosses are still subject to change. One boss was actually changed amidst our guild raid testing, and that was Shriekwing, funnily enough, so this is still a possibility for you as well, just keep that in mind. Now if you would like to join the discussion with all things World of Warcraft related, then be sure to join our Discord with the link in the description box below, and if you wish to stay updated on the content of my channel, then feel free to subscribe. Okay, now with any further ado, let's go right ahead and have a look. Just a quick statement before we begin. Two bosses are missing on this list, namely Sludgefist and the Stone Legion Generals, or rather in this video. The reason being that Sludgefist was buggy for me when testing it, disconnecting our entire raid group after he interacts with the first pillar, while the Stone Legion Generals had me disconnect as well, and I couldn't really test them, unfortunately. Alright, let's get into it. Okay, so we'll actually start right off and get into the first boss of Castle Nathria, which is Shriekwing. Shriekwing is a pure single target boss on all difficulties I tested him on, which was normal, heroic, and mythic. We didn't progress far in mythic really though, so don't take my 100% word for any boss or ad patterns in that difficulty yet, as I'm honestly just not sure. I'll be uploading some actual thorough Shadow Priest raid tips for the raid once the raid is actually live. Okay, so since Shriekwing is single target, I played with Fortress of the Mind, Body and Soul, Misery, and not Twist of Fate actually, which I'll explain in a second, Mind Bomb, Auspicious Spirits, Damnation, and Surrender to Madness. Our other guild Shadow Priest played with Ancient Madness here. The reason I chose Misery above Twist of Fate was because of dot management, honestly. Shriekwing forces you to hide behind a pillar quite frequently, as he's essentially a blind bat that tracks you with sonar. If you get hit by the sonar pulses, he spots you, jumps at you, and deals a ton of damage. If you fail to drop the blood pools behind the pillars out of his line of sight, you get a load of stacks from a debuff and you clog up the room with mess as well, also of course you take a lot of damage. Because of this movement, I stuck to Misery for our raid tests in order to keep dots rolling on the boss. Damnation is strong here for similar reasons of course, because you'll be needing it either during this hide and seek game with him or in the intermission phase in which you have to hide behind pillars at all times and will have to reset your entire rotation once you're back in the regular fighting stage. Now keep in mind that I haven't done or looked at any simulations here, as raid testing isn't really meant to let you figure out how to deal with a ton of damage, or rather how to deal a ton of damage yourself, but much more to test boss dynamics and mechanics. Now, whether or not my talent build is the one we choose later on is completely up in the air. Please keep that in mind and don't take my talents as the go-to talents for now. Okay, so I used Surrender to Madness towards the end of the fight in order to kill him, but either he went buggy or perhaps this was intended, but when he transitioned to his intermission phase, unfortunately once more because we were not fast enough, he dropped my Surrender to Madness debuff and I was actually able to stay alive rather than dying. Whether or not this means that we could possibly use Surrender to Madness multiple times throughout the fight, that remains to be seen. Overall, a good boss though, and I think it'll be fun for you guys to play. Okay, the next boss we will be looking at is Huntsman Altimore. Huntsman Altimore is probably one of the most engaging and fun bosses for us because there's more than one enemy in front of you at all times, sometimes up to 3 or even 4. I played him on both normal and mythic difficulty, and this is probably going to be one of the bosses that will be manhandled relatively quickly by most raid groups, much so in mythic as well. He's fairly easy at the moment, but a lot of fun nonetheless. I actually ran the exact same talent build than on the last boss, with the only thing changing being Psychic Link instead of Auspicious Spirits, so Fortress of the Mind, Misery, Psychic Link, Damnation, and Surrender to Madness. I made total use of Damnation here in order to keep my dots rolling on both the Huntsman and his hounds as frequently and as thoroughly as possible. You can surrender to Madness more than once in this fight, and depending on your raid's fight length, probably up to 3 times. For me it was twice on normal mode. Every time one of the Huntsman's hounds is around 20% of health, I used Surrender and went crazy on both targets as much as possible before killing the hound and continuing on the boss. Key to this fight is our dot management and Devouring Plague management pretty much, so essentially the core of this new Shadow Priest. Also, once you play him, do not try to Shadow Word Death the small adds unless you're sure that they will die through your Shadow Word Death, because otherwise they will kill you as they stack a debuff which will actually take more damage, like 1200% more damage, which also means that you will take that damage in return should your Shadow Word Death not kill the small adds. Next up we have the Sun King Salvation, or as many of you guys still know this boss by, Kel'Thuz's Sunstrider, which was the name it has on the alpha. Now most of you probably know Kel'Thuz, and he is actually in this fight, but he's not fighting at all. Instead, we have to save him from the Venthyr who torture him. This fight is an AoE centered fight, with 3, 4 or even 5 mobs up in front of you at all times. I've heard that even more can be up, but that wasn't the case for us, with downtimes in between. I personally played with Searing Nightmare, which I'm pretty sure is very strong here, but unfortunately the ad positioning was kind of unsuitable for Searing Nightmare, and I would have been much better off with Misery, at least in our raid group, but oh well, it is what it is. Apart from that, no real changes to talents here once more. The fight is relatively simple, with the DPS's job simply being to nuke down all ads. I only tested this fight on normal difficulty however, so I can't really say anything about Mythic Raid Testing. Overall, I feel like this fight could be pretty interesting for us, and we'll probably see a multitude of talent builds used, especially so with of course Ancient Madness or Surrender to Madness, as it all depends on boss positioning and ad positioning respectively, even more so for Searing Nightmare or the use of Misery. I personally feel as if some of the downtimes we will experience in between ad packs will be a bit frustrating, as we will have to reset our entire rotation again and just start over, which is kind of annoying. I don't know, we'll have to wait and see really, but even though this boss fight seemed very interesting, it also felt incredibly underwhelming to me, because on normal mode it just died incredibly fast. Alright, Artificer Xymox is next, and I was only able to test the Artificer unfortunately on normal and on heroic difficulty. This is one of the fights which is a bit weird, but also a lot of fun. On Heroic, there's a multitude of ads that spawn, which you can kill at certain times, and also allies which will be mind controlled and you have to free them from that said mind control, so a lot of targets to dot and to just damage at times. I played this fight with a multitude of talent builds, with both Auspicious Spirits and Psychic Link, as well as Fortress of the Mind and Unfurling Darkness, but unfortunately the boss died pretty quickly in normal mode, while being incredibly hard doing the Mythic Raid Testing, or rather the Heroic Raid Testing actually, so my tests were a little bit skewed. As there can be a lot of moving involved for you here, depending on how many mechanics you have to deal with, you'll certainly be making frequent use of Damnation though, at least I did, and especially so on Heroic, and I was using most of my time to apply, to reapply, or to manage my dots, rather than mind flaying to fill the time. Again, this is one of the fights though which could turn out to be quite interesting, and could most certainly be one which we are very strong at due to just the amount of trash or rather ads that spawn. The Hungering Destroyer would be next on our list, and this is actually a raw single target fight, at least on both normal and heroic difficulty. This fight is actually pretty nice, as it reminds me a lot of the Butcher back in High Mall, with having to arrange 2 camps in order to deal the leech debuff, or rather to deal with the leech debuff, and just feeling like a DPS check in general. The fight is quite simple, and you'll be reverting to a single target build here once more. This makes Fortress of the Mind strong, while Shadow Crash can also be used here as well. I personally played with Auspicious Spirits though, just to make the general rotation smoother with a higher insanity gain, and I played with Surrender to Madness. I surrendered at the end of the fight at exactly 11% boss HP, and the surrender was timed quite well I would say, with me dying only 3.5 seconds before the boss actually died. I misplayed though, and I could have easily used another Void Form after the surrender Void Form, but I was actually tunneling and I just didn't see it. And that's honestly a problem I have with Void Form currently. Not only do I have to have a threshold of 90 insanity to activate it, it also feels incredibly weird to use because of it. When the boss forces you to move away from him, be sure to move away quickly and as far away as you can. The boss will do this multiple times throughout the fight, and if possible, keep the timers in your sights in order to either circumvent this movement phase by pooling a bit of insanity to apply Devouring Plague during its movement, or to have Damnation available to just do so as well. The next boss, which comes right after the Hungering Destroyer, is Lady Innerva Darkvein. And Lady Darkvein is probably in the top 3, I personally would say, of our best fights. She constantly spawns an ad, which, when playing with Surrender to Madness, allows us to make frequent use of it once more, similar to the Huntsman Altimore, while the boss room itself is relatively small and well structured in a half circle, which lets us have everything in range at all times. For us as DPS, the only important mechanic on normal mode was to position yourself so that you can cut the red orbs that spawn and to soak the little puddles that will actually be thrown towards you, as you'll see in the footage people will be doing, and nuking down the ads when they spawn as quickly as possible, which of course was a great way for me to test Surrender to Madness. We did wipe a couple of times on this boss because the mechanics had to be understood by everyone first, but I think that once they are for your raid, the fight itself is relatively simple. As you'll have more than just Lady Darkvein in front of you most of the time, this is not a single target fight, and therefore I of course used Misery. I used Psychic Link on this fight a couple of tries as well as Auspicious Spirits, but I killed the boss using Auspicious Spirits actually. I personally would say that Psychic Link would be the better option here probably currently. Overall a very nice boss for us though, and again, arguably one of the top 3. Our second to last boss in this video is the Council of Blood. The first raid test of the Council of Blood was on July 30th, so almost 3 weeks ago, and it was before our Shadow Priest rework. I'll still play some of that footage just to reminisce of the old Void Form. Rest in peace. The second raid testing of the fight was done on Friday, and that was on normal mode, with the new Shadow Priest already available of course. I like the idea that Blizzard follows here, with the dancing and the moving around and all, but due to the 3 bosses running around seemingly all the time, the challenge here is to keep track of your dots while focusing down the according boss, which will be focused by your raid. Honestly, after playing the fight for a couple of times, the encounter felt stressful, much more than it feels satisfying, but in all fairness this may just be because there is still some time involved with getting used to the new iteration of the Shadow Priest especially, as it's been over 4 years since we last played it back in Warlords of Draenor. My advice to you here is to position yourself properly to dodge the incoming waves of dancers as quickly as possible in order to get back to dealing damage. When moving correctly, you will essentially only have to move a few steps inwards and then ahead, basically ending up right behind the first wave of dancers you've just dodged, which will allow you to stand safely. Apart from that, this boss still needs more testing for me personally. I will be sure of course to keep you updated. Last but not least, we have Sire de Nathria. Now I've only tested Sire de Nathria on Heroic, and this boss is one which will probably be a lot of fun to most of you. You can choose to either focus Sire de Nathria and important ads of course by playing a Cleave build, possibly with Misery or Fortress of the Mind, or you can just bomb down all ads which spawn, in which case you'll be playing with Searing Nightmare most likely. I've tried both, and I must certainly say that I had more fun with Searing Nightmare here, but we'll have to wait and see. This is a boss that is actually a lot of fun and allows you to concentrate on just dealing damage, at least in phase 1. Unfortunately, the boss was pretty tightly tuned, and therefore we never got to see phase 2, missing it by about 0.3% on our best try. As it currently stands, this was the fight I had the most fun on in general, as it was actually pretty engaging right from the start and felt as if we were able to make use of so many different talents here. Unfurling Darkness, Damnation, Misery or Searing Nightmare, as well as Ancient Madness or Surrender to Madness all saw their uses for me, and all were actually pretty engaging to play. I'd say that this boss is one I'm looking forward to the most once Shadowlands goes live, but it'll need more testing on my end at least, as I had only tested it on Heroic and therefore never made it that far into the fight. Okay, that'll just about sum up the first look at Castle Nathria here. Now, I didn't want to go into detail with the bosses too specifically, as I wanted to keep this video structured and not too long, but I'll be making more of these in the upcoming time, so you'll see a lot more boss gameplay and explanations in the future. How does Castle Nathria look for you so far? Do you think you'll enjoy this raid? I personally like it, and it's a good start into the expansion in my opinion, arguably a lot better than Uldir, even though I must say that Uldir wasn't too bad in my opinion either, but I might stand alone there. Be sure to let me know your thoughts in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for watching. A special thanks to my supporters over at Patreon. We actually have some new patrons now, and so a special thanks to Mad Universe, Karina, Juan, Dome, Ozan, Chupak, and Rhymes, as well as all other supporters on Patreon and on Discord. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, as it goes a long way, and again, feel free to subscribe if you wish to stay updated on the content of this channel. Now, as always, have a good one my friends, get excited for Shadowlands, and I will see you all in the next one.